right on.
So, as I was saying, as we move over here to the implementation side, how do these and other family engagement policies play out on the ground?
In a comment one of you made earlier about practitioner and policymaker, I feel like, and I was a former kindergarten teacher and an elementary principal, I am more comfortable in the practitioner side, but in the role at the State Department, you're taking policies and trying to make sense of them so that it is meaningful for the practitioners. So when we look at our family engagement efforts that we've been doing in Maryland, and we purposely named it family engagement, not family involvement. We've done a lot of work around trying to explain to different stakeholders the difference between the two, and it's like you said, it's not the bake sales and the spaghetti dinners, it's making parents an equal partner in the whole process of working with the children that we serve. So we've put a lot of effort into trying to create local advisory councils. We have a state advisory council. We have local councils. We've tried to, provide training to look at how can you engage the families in your community? What's your community look like? How can you be sensitive to the members in your community? Because in Maryland, as in many other states, the demographics are changing constantly, and teachers have to have the capacity to understand how to work with families that look different from them, and look at the needs in their community. And that definitely is an area that we're very aware of. We don't feel higher ed is yet at the table with understanding what they need to do to prepare teachers to be able to work with the changing families in their community. Families, are being more outspoken, I think, in some ways, and are asking for the needs of their child to be met. I get phone calls from parents typically who are frustrated with their school or their school district, and they call me. I mean, when it's time for fall enrollment, I get the calls, my child can't get into pre-K, I make too much money, how can you help me? And I feel very frustrated because I can't offer them the answers they need, but at least hearing from them, just like when you make those phone calls to your congressional offices, those phone calls give me examples and stories that I can share with others to give them the example so that I'm not so detached from when I was in a school as a classroom teacher. So we're very aware of the needs. Funding for us is always an issue, and we try to play that role of going to the policymakers to say, if we just had more funds to meet these needs or help us make connections with, and we do a lot of work in Maryland with business partnerships if we can, the corporations, try to get the ear of those people, because sometimes they don't even know that they could help. They'll say we want to help, and they don't even know what needs exist in a practical way that they could offer support. Raising a Reader would be one good example where, in Baltimore City, they took that on as their own initiative and brought in the business community to help support that. We rolled it out as a state with the limited funds we got, Race to the Top, to bring that program in, but it's now taking off in places where, I have Dorchester County sitting here, and the early childhood supervisor who, has gone above and beyond trying to bring in those other businesses to help support initiatives. So, I feel like we know what the right thing is to do. We don't always have the capacity to know how to roll it out in the right way, so we'll continue to work with that and try to find opportunities to have all of our families feel that they are partners in the education of their child.
I have so many thoughts. I hope that I don't go all over the place now. It's something when I was thinking about educational policy and how it has really positively impacted my role and then the families that live in the community, is that all these new Judy centers, very recently there was a large expansion of Judy centers, which came heavily from the federal government's pre-K expansion grant. So that also to answer your question, and back to, I have noticed a trend at the local level of a stronger push for early childhood initiatives, and sometimes things do take time. Not everywhere has a Judy center yet, but if you looked in Baltimore City, for example, 5-6 years ago, there were 2, and now they're getting ready to open their 13th Judy Center. And a lot of that funding did come from the federal government provided to the state that then decided to open up all these extra Judy Centers throughout the state of Maryland. So, and with that funding, we've been, at least at my site and at many of these other Judy Centers, we've been able to engage the families in a way that I don't know they would have otherwise been able to. So even with these Judy Center grants, that's how we're able to function, is with grant funding. So we've been able to develop a lot of relationships with families because we've been able to invite them in for programming that these grants are paying for. There's also other grants available in the community that other people are getting also from the government that has allowed them to offer a free breastfeeding class for families and free developmental parent workshops that families are able to access for free, that since I was able to be hired under this grant, I can tell them about it. Some things that we do on the ground at the Judy Center, specifically to engage families, that these policies are allowing us to do, I talked a little bit about before, but I think the most important thing is creating a relationship with those families. And the keynote speaker, Ellen Galinsky, said something that I wrote down because I thought it was great. And she was talking about childhood development here, but I think it is appropriate to any development in our whole lives, which is there's no development without relationships. So those little babies need relationships, but adults do too. Their 4-year-olds, their 5-year-olds do too. So all these policies, all this funding, when they do trickle down to the local level, it really does work if you have the right programs in place. And I believe anyway that's a lot of this Judy Center model and some of these other models that we're talking about today, they do work. So I think that I've noticed that I think a lot of people in the federal government, state government, local government are noticing that, because just at my desk alone, people do call, people from the city council are calling me, oh, I want to come take a tour, I want to see what this Judy Center thing's about, what does it mean to engage a 2-year-old family? So I am seeing people take notice at our level too. Yeah, so that's, and so by us being able to invite people in, developing those relationships, I think that it's really helped a lot.
I just have a question. The Judy Centers, I've only heard great things about them, but how do you decide where you're going to locate a Judy Center?
My understanding, and maybe you might even know more about this than I do actually, so since the MSDE, my understanding from this recent set of 5 to 7 that were opened to Baltimore City, the decision was made based on where the Judy Centers already were located. So I believe they looked at location and where the greatest need was, and also where they thought they could be successful too. Like I know at my school, I really am appreciative of my principal. She's really ready to engage the community. She's already hired 6 different Spanish-speaking interpreters to enable those families to be able to come in and communicate and not be intimidated. So it was really easy to get our Judy Center off the ground. I don't know if you have do you know any more information about the selection?
I mean, they are placed in Title I schools with Title I schools. So, they're in areas of high poverty or any other high need that would, give them maybe a little more need that we need to address. When she said the preschool development grant that we got, we used money to push preschool classrooms and Judy Centers. We used the funds for both of those initiatives.
Can I ask one more? I'm sorry. I'm very interested in this. What makes you decide if you're going to, I know the Title I public schools, they all have the pre-K, but there's also a lot of Head Start. So how do you decide where the funds will best be spent? Or are they like 2 different buckets? I'm just trying to understand how those decisions are made. Because they do seem to compete.
We've tried to make them in Maryland be less competitive. We actually this summer got together with our school systems on the eastern shore of Maryland and met with the Head Start, because we don't have state-funded Head Start. The grantees are several various grantees in the state, and met with Head Start because there just seemed to be a need to develop a relationship. As you talk about the importance of relationships, we didn't have a very strong relationship, and they were starting to feel like there was competition, that parents maybe were being kind of counseled into, oh, don't put your child in Head Start, put them in our public pre-K program. And the public pre-K was just trying to, they have these slots available, and they certainly want to make parents aware that they could have those as well. So, so that was our first step, and we spent a day together just talking about how do we develop that partnership, and we treat them the same way we would with any of our community programs. It's not a competition. It's a mixed delivery system is what we're shooting for in Maryland.
And a little bit more about Head Start and Judy Center specifically. A requirement of the Judy Center grant is to have an MOU with a Head Start partner. So I'm actually next week meeting with my Head Start partner to talk about more strategic planning. And one goal that we have is they are going to expand their 3-year-old program because pre-Ks have increased. So there's a greater need for 3-year-old programming. So they're reducing their 4s. Their programs were made, they have 9 classrooms, so they're still keeping 9 classrooms, but instead of having half 3s, half 4s, they're going to make more 3s. So we're able to, because of the pre-K expansion grant, we're now enabled to act on, and working together with Head Start, they are now able to give more education to 3-year-olds that prior to that weren't receiving any care. So it's really meant to work together with everyone in one unity.
Yeah,
we're just mesmerized.
Like, this is great. This is it. It's true partnership. It's the way you do it.
Yeah. I'm enjoying the
I have to ask a question too, if we have a minute to ask. So I'm a Maryland teacher, so this is all very familiar to me, and I'm assuming like everybody knows what a Judy Center is.
We did that in the beginning.
Okay, I missed that part, sorry. Now that we're in a place where ESSA has been reauthorized and the states are working on their plans, my first question to you, Judy, is do you feel like it's a step forward or sort of this nebulous, like, we're not quite sure what the feds want and we're contorting ourselves to figure out what we need to do to comply? So is it a net positive or a net, like, another, chaos? And then secondly, for organizations like ours and others, so in Massachusetts, I'm sure they're doing their state plan and others, what advice would you give us as states are working on these plans to help support and inform that process?
I actually just spent Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday in Minneapolis with other states, with the Council of Chief State School Officers. And that's what we spent our time on, was talking about the new ESSA and what that means, and trying to understand how to be advocates for the early learning. And so we are having those discussions in Maryland right now. We were on this fast track to try to get a plan submitted. States can submit in March or they can submit in July. Some states have already been fast tracking it and trying to get their drafts out so they could meet the March submission, thinking that that means if they have a state plan in place earlier than the school systems and the schools, when they write their plans, they could do that this summer. They have enough time to do it. The downside is they're fast tracking it before all this guidance documents have been coming out, and so the early learning guidance document just came out last Thursday. And so if you're a state who's already been doing your plan, you haven't even seen the guidance document that tells you what you could spend your Title I and Title II funds on. And Maryland was on that fast track, and I was been like a crazy person trying to sit in all these different subcommittees, because sometimes I'm like the lone early childhood voice. And pardon my early childhood supervisor friends who heard this story yesterday, but I got so frustrated that I have a stuffed Lorax in my office. I have some stuffed characters because I'm still a kindergarten teacher. And I took the Lorax and I pinned a note to them saying I speak for the first 4 grades and took it to meetings. Unfortunately, I was typically sitting with secondary folks who didn't even know who the Lorax was. So, I said, Dr. Seuss, Lorax, maybe. I said, all right, never mind.
People are crazy.
I know, we do the crazy thing. So I'm sitting this yellow thing next to me at every meeting. But just to make the point that you need to think we are not a subgroup. Early childhood is not a subgroup. It is a third of the continuum in our pre-K to 12 system in Maryland. It's a third of the time that we have these children, and it means we need to look at everything we do through the lens of what do they need that's going to look a little different than what they're going to need through the second third and the final third of their school career. So We're working on the ESSA plan, and I got a lot of ideas this week that I'm going to try to take back and push, but it's hard. I mean, and we're now going for the July submission, so I feel like I have a little more time to work on that. But I gave out the documents yesterday. We had an early childhood supervisor briefing in Maryland, and I told them, you need to look at this, and you need to see what it says you have the flexibility to do that you didn't have before. Guess what? You can use Title II funds to do professional development with your community providers alongside the public school teachers. You can do this. You need to be out there telling people now, because if you wait until the plans start rolling out, it's almost too late to try to get them to back up and think about how to really address those first 4 years.
Just quickly, is it public information which states are going for which date?
Yeah, they're well.
Is it public information or no?
It's not that it's not public information, but I don't think you'd know what their submission date, because we just changed ours from March to July.
I got you. Well, maybe more of it nasty for some
But
information.
they've been posting. Some of the states have already posted their drafts, and everybody's kind of viewing other states' drafts to see what they're doing or
Okay,
get ideas.
That's really helpful. Thank you. I think
I was just going to say,
one of the things, I went to a meeting recently at the Department of Education around state developing plans, and one of the big things that Secretary King has been pushing is stakeholder engagement and really having states, as they're developing their plans, have parents, families, community members at the table while the plans are being developed and really explain to them. I know a lot of states don't even fully understand the legislation, but to help them, develop the plan together, that it's not just coming from the state folks, that it's coming from the local school district as well as families as they're developing these plans. And they are very serious about it, because they actually told people in the room that if it's not happening, to report it. So I'm hoping that states will be mindful of this as they're developing the plans, to really bring families and community members together to co-write this plan.
Thank you, and thank you for the questions. I appreciate them coming spontaneously, and we love the engagement. So final question for the panelists, whoever would like to answer before we head to lunch. So raising a reader, how do these policies support or have the potential to support the implementation of raising a reader? I know Gabrielle's questions kind of kicked us off, but anyone have any thoughts they'd like to share with the group?
I just had a quote, and I just wanted to, I thought this when I read this morning, actually, on Twitter. I thought it was great to answer this question, and it came from Yoli Flores from the Campaign for Grade Level Reading, and she said, the way to disrupt intergenerational poverty is to ensure kids can read and ensure parent success along the way. So I think that hopefully that these policies will really help to ensure that parents are a voice for their children, and that raising a reader, of course, I love raising a reader because it does include families, it does bring them to the table, and it supports literacy efforts. So that was just kind of be mine.
I will just say two things really briefly. In Congress, they view states as experimental labs, right? So you're doing all the innovative things. Where you have in your program where parents are engaged and you're purposefully engaging them, please invite your member or your staffers from your members' offices to see that. Invite them to see the parents engaged and let them know how important it is. They're looking for elevating, what's the next wave. They know that early childhood is important. They really need to see that parents are central to their child's development and success. So I would say that. Please engage them on that because they're looking for it. And do it in August when they have time. And once you engage staffers and they become engaged, they view you as their resource and will call you and contact you and really engage you in policy. The next thing is raising a reader is really, it's like McVie in terms of it is quintessentially parent engagement. And so you serve as the glue. So as Congress looks to do these systems, early childhood systems, and link them with medical homes and other systems, you're really the way to show them how to do parent engagement because they don't know. They don't know what that means. You had said you didn't know how to talk to parents. They don't either. And so incorporating and implementing Raising a Reader in this system really is going to benefit them to see that, okay, parent engagement is important, and here's how I best do it, since you have evidence behind what you're doing. Good to you, Sarah.
Something that I really like about Raising a Reader is that it's not called a literacy activity, it's called a family engagement activity, and I thought that was a really strategic slogan or motto for Raising a Reader.
Was it strategic?
It's true.
It appeared that way to me.
Yes, we are very, very smart.
And you work hard.
The reason why I thought that was so great was because, yes, we're sending books home, we're getting children used to the act of checking out books from the library, but it's enabled me at the local level to, we have a workshop called How to Raise a Reader, and I reference the Raising a Reader program, make sure they really understand what they're supposed to do with the books. There's a very high illiteracy rate in my community. Many people are speaking Spanish, and some of the books are in English, but they're actually not literate in Spanish either. So it doesn't even sometimes matter what language it's going home in. But we were able to say, no, you're still empowered. You are still their parent. You're still their first teacher. The most important part of reading a book is to spend time with a book with your child. You don't have to read the words that are on the page. You can make up a story about the pictures. Ask them how and why questions. It's given us a way to engage families and really bring literacy into the home, but then we're able to say, here's how to do a read aloud. It's given us a really great tool to be able to engage them on a variety of ways. So sometimes we'll have workshops that are just about Raising a Reader. Other times they'll be in a conference with the teacher and we'll be there to support the teacher and the parent. And we can bring up Raising a Reader. Oh, if your child's struggling to learn the alphabet, here's some great books in this Raising a Reader bag you can go over with them too. So I've just seen a great connection there.
Absolutely.
And, we're all about, right now, college and career readiness. It's what everybody talks about. And people get very frustrated when they look at scores. Maryland's a park state, and they look at the park scores, and they look at the NAEP scores. And right now our state board is talking a lot about why haven't the reading scores gone up? Why are we so flat? We're just not seeing much change. What's wrong? And, of course, we all have always probably heard the I don't call it a story, but high school teachers say if they just did a better job in middle school, elementary, and the elementary says if the parents just did a better job, we'd all be in good shape. So in Maryland, to kind of help tell the story, we have a fairly new kindergarten readiness assessment and that we developed, and in our literacy scores, when I compare those, and I've been trying to push this out to people to tell the story that when we look at the proficiency of our children coming into kindergarten, we measure them on the pre-K standards. So it's really what did they learn as a 4-year-old coming into kindergarten. We see the same gap at that point. So as a 4-year-old, there's a gap. We see the same proportion of a gap when they are being measured on PARCC assessments at 3rd grade and NAEP 4th grade and all the way up. It's the same proportion. And so if we want them to be college and career ready, while, we always say if the parents would do a better job, we know that the gap exists before they ever come into the school door. And now we know, because we're measuring pre-K standards, it's happening before they're 4. So they're coming into pre-K and they're still behind. So we're trying to really help people understand that we need to start at the beginning. We can't wait till they get to school and start wringing our hands saying we've got a gap. So I think, Raising a Reader is one of those efforts that's helping to work with parents. We certainly need, besides Raising a Reader, lots of initiatives to help work with parents, and Judy Centers would be another example of, again, trying to get to them from birth.